All right, guys, imagine that I forgot to record the Zoom meeting today for the juniors, so I am going to rectify that and do a screencastify for you guys and go over the syllabus for the week and the study guide for you. So here we go. So we went over the syllabus for this week. So this week you should have, on Monday we started the nervous system, Unit 9 in Schoology. So you should have watched and listened to the central nervous system brain lecture that Miss Brown did for us in Schoology in Unit 9 and look through those notes. You should have also created a brain model, and you needed to put what the item is and what it does. So some of you put what it is but forgot to write what it does, and you get that from the notes that Miss Brown provided to you. You should have also completed the Lesson 9 terminology quizzes, and there is the code for you. I'm not sure if it's still active. It might have expired. It only lets us have that code active for so long. So that takes us to Tuesday. You should have watched the neuron PowerPoint, gone over that, and you need to open that up fully because there are some notes at the bottom of that to help you with the questions in Schoology. You should have also made a model of the neuron and labeled what it is and what it does to get those 20 points, and then submitted a picture in Schoology. You should have also completed the Nerves of Steel, Chapter 13, in your medical terminology workbook, reading and questions. Those were all multiple choice questions. And then looked at the study guide to prepare for the test on Monday. So that takes us to Wednesday, which was yesterday. You should have completed the quizzy on the nervous system. Join my quiz. All right, so back at it. Sorry, that was the vet calling. So Wednesday, you should have completed the quizzes, and there's the code. I'm not sure if it's still available or not. If you haven't done it and you want to get points for doing that, you could do the actual thing and take a screenshot and email it to me at martind@butlertech.org. Then we have work on the study guide and watch the nervous system problems videos in Schoology. So there should have been one on wobblers and some different things. And then complete the nervous system and special senses reading and questions in Schoology. That takes us to today. You should have completed the self-evaluation, both the animal portion and the self-evaluation questions. So you need to complete both portions of those so I can give you the full 50 points. The animal portion, you can either submit pictures of you taking care of your animals or videos. You can do some enrichment with your animal, taking them for a walk, something like that, and just send us a picture of you doing that. Or you can watch one of the zoo's Facebook or YouTube videos and give us 2 things you learned about that. You also need to take the Lesson 9 quiz on the Dean Vaughn medical terminology. So Lesson 9 quiz is today. And you are now making up for the Zoom meeting, and we'll get ready to go over the study guide next. So let's exit out of this, and here we go with the study guide. So what do dendrites do? Before we get started with that, I should probably tell you that the Quizlet in the study materials folder that Miss Brown made for us in Unit 9 is going to be a good thing to go over to review for the test, and also has a bunch of these questions in it. So make sure you see the Nervous System Study Guide Quizlet in the Study Materials folder in Unit 9 in Schoology. All right, so what do the dendrites do? They receive impulses and they direct them to the soma or the cell body. So they are branches and they bring in that impulse and that information and they take it to the cell body. From there, it goes out the axon. So the axon carries impulses away from the cell body. So the axon then carries the impulses away from the cell body or the soma. What is the name of the chemical substance that is contained in the synapse? So the synapse is at the end of the axon. It kind of looks like these little frog fingers or the hands of our crusted geckos. And the neurotransmitter is the chemical that is in the synapse, and it helps to spread the impulse, to send the impulse from one neuron to the next. So these neurons are all lined up in a chain, and they send impulses back and forth. So if you were to put your hand on a hot stove, the impulses would get sent through the neurons up to your brain, and the brain would say, take your hand off the stove. And then that impulse and that message would get sent through the neurons down to your hand, and you would remove your hand from the hot stove. So that happens very quickly, but those neurons are very important in sending those messages. What is the myelin sheath? So the myelin sheath is a protective layer that goes around the neuron. So it's the protective sheath that goes around the neuron. All right, moving on down, what are the parts of the central nervous system? Well, the brain and the spinal cord are the two parts of the central nervous system. And then what does the peripheral nervous system consist of? Well, the peripheral nervous system consists of the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system are both part of the peripheral nervous system. So I'll say it again, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system are all part of the peripheral nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is your fight or flight. So if a cat goes running across the floor because Jack kind of like barked at it or whatever, or it got too close to his food and he's like, boop, get away. And then so the cat starts to dart across the room. The cat is in fight or flight. It decides if it hisses at Jack or it takes off across the room and hops up on the top of the fridge. So that is fight or flight with the sympathetic nervous system. And then when it's sitting up on the fridge and calmed down and Jack went back to laying down on his bed, then the parasympathetic nervous system takes over. And the parasympathetic system brings the body back to homeostasis. So it's in charge of rest and digest. So it brings the body back down from that fight or flight. The parasympathetic system brings the body back down to that homeostasis, that calmness, the rest and digest. So when animals are in fight or flight, they shut down their digestive system. They don't have time to digest because they are on the move. They're trying to save their life or get away from something. So it shuts down all different types of systems so it can focus on getting to a safe place. And so that is the sympathetic nervous system. Then the parasympathetic system brings the body back to a calm state and gives us rest and digest. So, all right, what is the major organ of the nervous system? That is the brain. And what covers the brain to protect it? Those are the meninges. And how many layers of meninges do we have? That is 3. We have 3 layers. So just want to talk just a little bit about meninges, the covering of the brain, and meningitis, so that you guys understand the vaccine that you guys have either gotten or going to get. Is a vaccine for meningitis. So as you guys are getting older, you're going to be heading off to college, where you don't sleep a whole lot because you're up studying in the library, and you're not eating very well because your mom's not there to cook for you, so you're chowing down on those ramen noodles, and you come in contact with a lot of different people. So meningitis is something that young adults, older teenagers or young adults can get, and it affects the meninges of the brain. So those three protective layers of the brain. So you have the brain, the meninges, and you have your skull. So if the meninges become inflamed and start to swell, what do you think's going to give? The skull? That's a hard bone. That's not going to give. So it's going to put pressure on the brain. And meningitis can cause, well, it can cause death, and it can cause severe brain problems. So that's why we choose to vaccinate teenagers about this time, so that as they move on in life and into college and stuff, they can be protected from meningitis. All right, moving on. What part of the brain secretes hormones? And that is the pituitary gland. It secretes hormones important for reproduction and growth. So the part of the brain that secretes hormones is the pituitary gland, and it secretes hormones important for reproduction and growth. Then we have the hypothalamus. Serves as a link between the nervous system and the endocrine system. So we just got done doing the endocrine system with the lymphatic system. So you learned about that. So the hypothalamus serves as a link between the nervous system and the endocrine system. The thymus, or the thalamus, is the central relay system for nerve impulses except for smell. So the way I think about the thalamus is like a stoplight. So you have these highways coming into this one stoplight, and the stoplight needs to tell them, where they can go. So you have all these impulses coming in to this one stoplight, and the thalamus is there to direct them to the different parts of the brain, so that they can get orders as to what they're supposed to do. So the thalamus, it receives impulses and then directs them to the proper part of the brain. And it does that for every impulse except for smell. All right, the largest part of the brain is the cerebrum, and it has 4 lobes. And so it's the largest part of the brain, and it stores information and creates responses, and also is responsible for voluntary movement. So when you're dancing, getting down because you're so excited about taking the nervous system test, that is voluntary movement, and that comes directly from the cerebrum. So you will notice if you go through the Quizlet, it does say the longest part of the brain. It's supposed to be the largest part. So that's just a typo there. So when you're going through that Quizlet to review for this test on Monday, which I know you're going to do, keep in mind that it's supposed to say the largest part of the brain, not the longest. So, all right, that takes us to the cerebellum. The cerebellum is responsible for 3 things. It is coordination of all movement, muscle activity, and balance. So I think of cerebellum the way I remember this. Bellum sounds a lot like ballerina. So cerebellum, ballerina. And ballerinas need to have a lot of balance and coordination and muscle activity. So that's how I remember the cerebellum is responsible for balance, muscle activity, and coordinates all movement. So cerebellum, ballerina. The cerebellum is also found in the back portion of your head. So if you've ever been out on ice and slipped and fell and hit the back of your head, or on a skateboard or roller skates or ice skates, and slipped and fell and hit the back of your head, you know, you rock that cerebellum, and, you know, it takes you a while to kind of to get your balance and your coordination back. So, so you need to be careful and protect your cerebellum when you're doing those things. Wear a helmet and stuff. So yeah. All right. What is contained in the brainstem, and why is it so important? Well, in the brainstem, it connects the brain to the spinal cord. That's what the brainstem does. And in the brainstem is contained the medulla oblongata, which is one of my most favoriteest words to say, medulla oblongata. So I talk about the medulla oblongata every chance I can, because the medulla oblongata is so very important, because the medulla oblongata controls life functions like heart rate, breathing, and reflex actions. So kind of like blinking. We don't think about blinking. That's a reflex. If you get something in your eye, you know, you blink. So the medulla oblongata is in the brain stem between the brain and the spinal cord. Extremely important that medulla oblongata is, because it controls all life functions, heart rate, breathing, and reflex. So please protect your medulla oblongata. What are the two types of peripheral nervous systems? Well, we answered this before. Oops, I skipped one. Go back. What is the pathway for all impulses going to and from the brain? Well, that is the spinal cord. And I think of the spinal cord as Route 75 there. It's a major highway, and it takes impulses to and from the brain. Take your hand off the stove. Well, those impulses, those neurons connect to the spinal cord, and the spinal cord shoots it straight to the brain, and the brain says, well, yeah, take your hand off the hot stove. And so it sends that impulse down that Route 75, that spinal cord, and into the neurons, and you take your hand off the hot stove. So that is the spinal cord. All right, now moving on to the peripheral nervous system, which we talked about before. We have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system are both part of the peripheral nervous system. So the sympathetic is your fight or flight. You know, do I stay and fight? Do I go? Do I run? That is part of your sympathetic nervous system. And then the parasympathetic nervous system means, okay, I'm good, I'm safe, and now your body can kind of reset, get to that resting stage, and then it can start to digest again. So, and return it to homeostasis. All right. The sympathetic nervous system is responsible for that emergency and stress responses. So when you need to be working on something and focusing on something, you are employing your sympathetic nervous system. You know, you got to get up, got to get going, and you're late for something, you are working with your sympathetic nervous system. And then when you get there on time and you have to wait maybe for something, then your parasympathetic nervous system, you know, starts to kick in, and your body goes back to that resting and digesting and homeostasis. All right, seeking to maintain and restore normal body function is the responsibility of the parasympathetic nervous system. And then going on down, define homeostasis. So homeostasis is a state of balance of the physiological system within the body. So a state of balance of the physiologic systems within the body. It maintains a stable internal environment. So that is homeostasis. And I think of somebody kind of meditating, is what I picture in my mind when I think of homeostasis, is just bringing that body back to a resting state. All the systems are working. Nothing's, nobody's panicking. Everything's working the way it should. So a state of balance of the physiologic systems within the body. It maintains a stable internal environment. So that is your study guide. Again, I do suggest that you go through the Quizlet that is in Schoology. I'll go ahead and show you where that is now. So I'll click into the course, and let's go down to Unit 9, the nervous system. Click on that. And then Ms. Brown has us set up with a nice folder down here that says study materials here. So let's click on that. There's the quizzes you should have done. There's a Kahoot in there if you want to call up a friend and do that. Here's a nervous system Quizlet. Here's one to go over some terminology that we learned in this unit. And this is the one that goes with the study guide itself, the Quizlet Nervous System Study Guide. So if you click on that, it brings this up. You just have to click here. And that gets you into these terms. You can go through the flashcards. You can play a game, do something live, take the test if that helps you. So you just go through the flashcards and review for the test on Monday. So, all right, I think that's it. Thanks, guys, and good luck on the test on Monday.